Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to everybody joining us for this webinar, Linking Social Protection, Agriculture, Food Security and Nutrition for Diversified Production and Diets. I will be your moderator today. My name is Jessica Owens, and I work with FAO, the Social Protection team in FAO. Today's webinar aims to share with you our experience in bringing together these different sectors to improve food security and nutrition. The webinar is based on a review of 5 different country experiences implementing the Cash Plus approach, so this approach in bringing together these different sectors to support rural households improve their productive capacity as well as to improve their nutrition, especially their diets. So before I begin, I would like to take a moment to give you a bit the rationale and the key elements of this approach. The first one is, why are we looking at healthy diets and diversified diets? So the first thing to take into account, and I think we all are aware of it, is that diets are a common cause of malnutrition in all its forms, and they contribute to disease. They also matter for nutrition outcomes as well as health outcomes in all stages of the life cycle. We also know that the consumption of too little nutritious dense foods, such as pulses, fruits and vegetables, meat, eggs, etc., are linked with wasting, stunting, micronutrient deficiencies, and in early childhood. So poor diets are therefore associated with a diverse range of health problems. We also know that healthy diets are costly. They cost more than energy sufficient diets. And therefore the question of how do we support everybody's access to healthy, nutritious food? The second part that I wanted to zoom into is, why are we looking at rural poor households in our approach? So here it is important to note that there are stark differences between rural and urban areas, and as well as wealth quintiles. For example, the prevalence of children eating foods from at least 5 food groups out of 8 is on average 1.7 times higher among children in urban households than in rural. And the same goes for wealth quintiles. And we also know that 2/3 of children who are hungry are in rural areas. Therefore, the importance to understand the rural poor, their decision-making processes, as well as the constraints that they face, and to ensure that they have access to nutritious food. The final component of this approach, or element of this approach, is agricultural production. So maybe you wonder, why are we looking at this as a channel towards healthy diets? And here, again, of some 570 million farms in the world, more than 475 million are smaller than 2 hectares. Many of these are the rural poor. These rural poor households depend on agricultural production, which is often used for both self-consumption as well as income generation, and to purchase food and access to other goods and services. We thus see the role of agriculture in these rural poor households, the pivotal role that this plays, and the potential for it to play in healthy diets. So one of the potential routes to making healthy diets more affordable and accessible is by increasing production and consumption of nutritious foods. And this is especially true for the poorest households. Affordability can be increased by increasing access to social protection, nutrition programs, agricultural development programs that prioritize and promote smallholders, poor smallholders, to diversify their crops that they grow and food that they eat. And this is exactly what FAO is doing. FAO is doing this by using this approach, and the approach comes together at 3 levels. The first one is working at the policy level. So FAO has been supporting greater coherence and linkages between the different sectors, between agriculture, food security, nutrition, social protection. It has also been supporting or building common understanding between these sectors and the stakeholders to come together and understand how these different interventions, what contributions do they make, and how the synergies can be developed. At the program level, FAO is supporting countries and governments in the design and implementation of these programs. And finally, FAO is also generating evidence to ensure to contribute at the national level policy dialogues. So in this approach has been taken, and we, by us and by many other organizations, are taking on this approach of bringing these different sectors together. The evidence that is coming out of these assessments are showing that the cash plus approach can improve agricultural production, income, food security, and dietary diversity. It can also support households not to have to resort to negative coping strategies in times of crisis or shocks, including, for example, now with the COVID-19 pandemic. So far we have seen the rationale for this approach and how these elements are bringing it together. We also have tried to show you how FAO is supporting the governments in applying this approach, and also a bit of the evidence, what it has shown. We now, in this webinar, our focus is, however, on how we do this. How have the governments implement, and with the support of FAO, implemented these approaches? What have been the bottlenecks? What have been the challenges? And what lessons can be learned for others who want to replicate such an approach? So next slide, please. So before I go on, I just wanted to remind you all that there are many other interesting webinars coming up. And so please do register if you are interested in any of these. The link will be shared in the chat box. Next slide, please. So as you can see, we have a fantastic a team of panelists with us today that have all been working on these issues. But before I introduce them, let me explain a bit of the format of this webinar we'll be taking. So we wanted to first give you an overview of the findings, the initial findings of this review of these 5 country programs. And then we wanted to open up to questions. And we thought the best way to do this is to also invite the practitioners, the people that have been involved in supporting these governments implement this cash plus approach, to answer and complement the presentation and be able to give greater details. So just as we go along, please remember that, that we have a question and answer box. Please feel free to put any of the questions throughout the presentation. And please do note for whom the question is directed and what are the, or what particular experience you're interested in knowing more about. We will also, okay. And I think that's the most important part. We will try to consolidate and answer all of your questions as best as we can. We will bring it to the panelists. For any questions that have not been answered, please note that in addition to the recording of this webinar and the presentation, we will also put a list of answers. We will try our best to answer all of the questions and put it on the website shortly after the webinar. So without further ado, I will introduce you to our panelists. Next slide, please. So we have first, our panelist is who will be introducing the review of all of this experience is Andrea Spray Bulungu. She's an independent consultant with 10 years of working experience in global nutrition issues. She has worked with many agencies and worked since 2012 with the World Bank. And she has also have extensive working experiences in different countries. Our next panelist is Ms. Azel Mirzabekova. She's coming from FAO Kyrgyzstan. She is our gender and rural women's expert in Kyrgyzstan, and she has been working with us, especially doing research on peace and violence, gender equity, identity, and sustainable development issues, and she will bring to the discussion some of the findings from Kyrgyzstan experience. Next is Marlen Tinaliev. He is also from Kyrgyzstan. He is our food security consultant. More recently, he's been working as the national project coordinator for the Russian-funded project under which this Cash Plus approach has been implemented. And he's been key in supporting the implementation of the approach in Kyrgyzstan. Next is from Armenia is Susanna Karapetyan. She's an economist, statistician. She's been working with the FAO team since July 2017, also under the same project, and supporting with the Cash Plus pilot in Armenia. And she will bring really key insights in the Armenia experience. Next is Laxon Chinengo from Lesotho. He has over 15 years of working experience in social protection and is key in our Lesotho office in linking social protection with pro-poor agricultural interventions, rural development. And he will also bring in some of the important lessons learned from the program that has been linking these different sectors in Lesotho. Next. We have also, happily, we have Ms. Fatou Mbaye from Senegal. She is our, she has several years of experience in promoting rural development and livelihoods, particularly in agriculture, food security, and social protection. She's been working with us for the last 4 years in the Senegal office. She's the social protection, food security expert and gender focal point. And she has been key in promoting the coherence agenda as well as the Cash Plus approach and piloting in Senegal. And next, this final but not least is Ms. Sylvia Salamagata. She's from Minagri, and she will be bringing us the experience from Rwanda. She has been working with agriculture and smallholders for the past 8 years and has held managerial positions in the Ministry of Trade and Industry. She was the focal point for Minagri in the project Strengthening the Impact of Rwanda VUP and Public Works and Beneficiaries Graduation Out of Poverty project. And will bring insights into how to link social protection, agriculture, and food security and nutrition. Next. So this is me. So I think I am the social protection consultant for FAO. Next. So I will now pass on to Andrea. Please, please do send us any questions that you may have already in the question and answer box. It's located at the bottom of your screen. If you have any issues, technical issues, you may let us know. But we hope that you will enjoy this presentation and that we can hear from you and answer many of your questions. Thank you. Over to you, Andrea.
Okay, thank you so much, Jessica, for the introduction. I'm hoping you can hear me now. My internet is a little bit unstable. Okay, I'm gonna just go ahead and continue. So again, thank you, Jessica, for the introduction, and thanks to everyone online for participating in this webinar today. I apologize in advance that my camera is off because I'm based in Uganda, where the internet is a bit unstable. And so in order to increase the likelihood that we have a solid connection, I am going to just keep my camera off. Let me go ahead and share my desktop with my slides. Let's get that going. Hopefully you can see that. Okay, so to get going, so improved food security and nutrition is often cited as a motivation for implementing these integrated social protection and agriculture projects. Although explicit efforts to implement integrated projects are actually fairly new, several impact evaluations have already been conducted and were summarized in the 2017 special issue of the journal Global Food Security. However, to date, only one impact evaluation, and few have even assessed their effect on diet. Further, although there is guidance available on principles and mechanisms for achieving better coherence for integrated projects overall, there is no guidance for achieving better coherence of integrated projects for nutrition. So the compendium that I've been working on is an effort to begin to try to close that loop. That is to start a dialogue about what it takes in the context of integrated social protection and agriculture projects to, in fact, increase their positive impact on nutrition outcomes. So in this presentation, I'm going to first provide a bit of background about linking social protection, agriculture, and nutrition for healthy diets. Then I'll briefly review the methods used to develop the case studies included in the compendium. And finally, I'll present a snapshot of the case studies and some key lessons learned. Okay, so as we all know, malnutrition, both undernutrition and overweight obesity, is a result of multiple interacting causes. As illustrated in the UNICEF framework, these causes can be categorized as immediate, underlying, and basic. Poor diet is an immediate cause of malnutrition. Globally, undernutrition remains the single biggest contributor to is now a leading cause of non-communicable diseases worldwide. Per Lancet 2013, we know that massive scale-up of nutrition-specific interventions will only reduce the prevalence of chronic undernutrition, that is stunting, by 20%. Interventions to address the underlying causes of malnutrition are therefore required in order to meet global goals. Social protection and agriculture interventions can improve nutrition by improving those underlying drivers. The burden of both poverty and undernutrition lie heavily in rural areas, as Jessica described. In low and middle income countries, most people living in rural areas rely on agriculture for their livelihood. Because poor rural households depend on their own agriculture production for both home consumption and income generation, household decisions regarding consumption and production are therefore very closely interlinked. What we know from impact evaluations is that agriculture interventions even those that increase diversity, sometimes, but not. What we also know from impacts, but not always, improve stunting and or diet, but alone are often insufficient to sustainably improve livelihoods or lift households out of poverty. So don't let this slide scare you. I promise that we won't stay here for very long. The figure on the left is a well-known logic framework for the pathways from cash transfers to nutrition. The figure on the right is a well-known logic framework for the pathways from agriculture to nutrition. The important point here is simply to note that for both cash transfers and agriculture interventions, improved diet is a key mediating factor to improve nutrition. So in this compendium, we assert that coherent integration of services from social protection, agriculture, and food security and nutrition sectors is required to maximize impact on improving nutrition outcomes for rural households. To frame the case studies, I'm presenting here a rough theory of change that we've applied rather ex post facto, if you will. It's a very simplified melding of the two logic frameworks we just saw, but a few points to underscore. First, given FAO's mandate, we're focused on food-based interventions. Accordingly, we aim to improve diets as an immediate driver to improve nutrition. That is, we acknowledge that there are other factors that we do not address which also influence nutrition. These case studies featured integrated social protection and agriculture interventions that comprise, at minimum, 4 common components. First, cash transfers. Second, provision of agriculture inputs. Third, training in nutrition-sensitive agriculture practices. And 4, nutrition education. As illustrated here, cash transfers may be used for either food or non-food. Agriculture inputs and training provided by the project may either be consumed or sold for income. The pilots all provided nutrition education in order to increase the likelihood that project inputs would in fact be used by households to improve diets. And although the focus of these case studies is on contexts where undernutrition predominates, we believe that the theory of change should equally apply to contexts of overweight and obesity. So just very briefly, the purpose of the compendium of case studies is to provide practical guidance for policymakers in designing and implementing integrated programs that bring together social protection, agriculture, and food households to improve their diets. In the compendium, we focus on mechanisms to achieve coherence for healthy diets at every phase of the project lifecycle, from conceptualization to the implementation. Historical documents and also in-depth interviews with key informants. Some of the key informants are here today as co-panelists. Jessica already introduced them, and they will, I'm sure, be very happy to answer any questions that you may have at the end of the presentation. So let's dive into the case studies. In the compendium, there are 5 case studies, including projects in Armenia, Kyrgyzstan, Lesotho, Rwanda, and Senegal. This is a brief bird's eye view of the case study projects. First, I want to underscore that each pilot built off an existing national cash transfer program. That is, the pilot beneficiaries, in addition to receiving agriculture inputs, training, and education, were also receiving regular cash transfers. The intervention design in each country emerged from a participatory and iterative multi-stakeholder process. So although there is some commonality across the interventions, the intervention inputs, and most especially the delivery platforms were different in each country. You will see that some projects provided seeds, livestock, and other inputs such as greenhouses to beneficiaries, whereas others provided maybe just seeds and fertilizers. Some projects had intensive, like weekly training for beneficiaries, and for some projects, the training and/or nutrition education was much less intensive, but maybe included home visits. Delivering the interventions also varied. But despite this variation, what we can say is that the quantitative and qualitative studies conducted by these projects point towards the potential of integrated projects to improve frequency of consuming nutritious foods and dietary diversity. I've alluded to it a few times, but it's important to underscore that these were in short duration. It's also important to note that most of the projects included in the compendium were not designed as impact evaluations. This is important to keep in mind, not only as a limiting factor, but more importantly, to appreciate how much can be accomplished, even with limited resources. Okay, so now having a rough idea of the intervention packages across all countries, let's look at some of the approaches taken to achieve coherence. I'm going to step through them one by one over the next few slides. So first, at the heart of most of these pilots was a multi-stakeholder working group that was instituted at the start of the project and continued to meet through the end of implementation. For example, in Senegal's Djal Djeg project, a regional working group was created by Governor Decree. The regional working group included representatives of three key ministries. The three ministries were essentially social protection, agriculture, and nutrition. The regional working group also included representatives of the local authorities, including mayors, prefects, and sub-prefects, technical officers, and civil society organizations that are involved in food security and nutrition interventions. The multi-stakeholder working group drove the conceptual design, they selected pilot locations and household targeting criteria, they designed the intervention, and they monitored implementation. In short, the partners of the multi-stakeholder working group were deeply engaged in every facet of the project. As we know, there is no one-size-fits-all solution. All projects included in the compendium conducted formative research that informed the design of the intervention package. That is the unique combination of agriculture inputs, training, and education provided to beneficiaries, and the platforms used to deliver it. The pilots in Kyrgyzstan and Armenia are really good examples. Through a series of iterative research activities, the program team in Kyrgyzstan came to understand that even within the target population of extremely poor households, there were still disparities in terms of capacities. In result, based on this information, in their package, they offered three package options. The first option, a package of seeds for nutrient-rich foods, was designed for poor households with relatively higher capacity, that is, land and labor. The second option, which was a more limited package of seeds for nutrient-rich foods, was designed for households with limited access to land. And the third option was geared towards income generation and included seeds and a small greenhouse to extend the growing season. So by contrast, in Lesotho, Rwanda, and Senegal, they provided a standard package that was nonetheless adapted to the unique needs in each pilot community. Also in Lesotho, Rwanda, and Senegal, the pilot intervention delivery platforms were built on existing community systems. For example, in Rwanda, the pilot utilized an existing cadre of community-based caseworkers. The Rwanda pilot also leveraged the existing government-supported farmer field school model of delivery. Caseworkers from the social protection sector received cross-sectoral training in farmer field school facilitation, agribusiness, financial literacy, nutrition, and gender. By using existing platforms, the Rwanda project team could focus its efforts on building capacity. Finally, most of the case studies also featured strong engagement from local authorities, who were partners in the multi-stakeholder working groups and often played a key role in delivering the interventions at the ground level. So for this work, remember that we're not so much interested in coherence in general, because good work here has already been done, but in elucidating the mechanisms for improving coherence for healthy diets. And to that end, these pilots also epitomize many key nutrition-sensitive principles. This slide is a little crazy, but here you'll see some of these globally accepted nutrition-sensitive principles. They're in the blue boxes here. First, you'll remember that in addition to the agricultural inputs, each of these pilots targeted households that were receiving cash transfers. So in this way, pilots could be said to be aiming to maximize the impact of household income on nutrition, in that they were combining cash transfers and with the agricultural inputs that could be used to further increase household income, that was combined with nutrition education and in some cases training in financial literacy and household budgeting. Also, all pilots promoted increased production of nutrient-dense foods, either small livestock and or nutrient-rich vegetables and crops. And many of the pilots aim to reduce post-harvest losses by providing training in post-harvest processing and food preservation, etc. So with this compendium, we really want to focus on the how of achieving coherence for healthy diets. And so with this final slide, I want to end by reviewing some of the features that are common across multiple pilots that seem to be factors of success. In particular, I want to highlight the factors with special significance for maximizing impact of these integrated social protection and agriculture projects on diet and nutrition. First, for most of these pilots, they identified that specified food security, diet, and or nutrition. So it was a shared objective that incorporated a nutrition outcome. Also, the pilots each had at least one lead government agency that was internally motivated to take to undertake an integrated project. So what do I mean by that? Well, for example, in Lesotho, the impetus was a serious drought. In Rwanda and Senegal, it was government interest in better promoting graduation of poor households from social assistance. So there was at least one agency in each of these pilots that was very interested in undertaking this type of integrated project. With the next one, working within a national framework that promotes cross-sectoral collaboration. So Rwanda and Senegal both have national policy frameworks that promote cross-sectoral collaboration. This was a real benefit for these pilot projects. In other countries, attracting and retaining the engagement of key sectors was sometimes a challenge. Regarding starting with key stakeholders, as noted earlier, nearly all pilots engage key stakeholders through their respective multi-stakeholder working groups, early and often and in very meaningful ways. They were engaged basically at every phase of the project. Regarding engaging policymakers responsible for nutrition. So responsibility for nutrition varies by country. And in many countries, nutrition is a shared responsibility across multiple ministries. In some countries, nutrition resides in the office of the president or prime minister. In other countries, nutrition is embedded in the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Agriculture. In Kyrgyzstan, for example, nutrition is shared by the Ministry of Health and 2 different departments of the Ministry of Agriculture. Most of the pilots in this compendium engaged at least one entity responsible for nutrition in the multi-stakeholder working group. It's notable, however, that Senegal was the only project that benefited from really deep engagement of the government entity responsible for nutrition, that is the CLM. So either through the multi-stakeholder working groups or, as in Rwanda, through formal, centralized and decentralized policy dialogues, each of the pilots in this compendium provided a forum for sectors to build shared understanding of agriculture's role and impact vis-a-vis social protection and vice versa. One of the key informants in this research had stated that without projects like this, there are very few opportunities for representatives of sectors to really engage in this manner and to gather this or to generate this shared understanding, which is really key to collaboration. So on the other side of the slide, I'm going to review a few factors of success that we've touched on earlier. So either through, let's see, so first, as we've seen in Kyrgyzstan and Armenia, within the population of poor households that qualify for social assistance, there is still a lot of variation in capacities. This may be about the availability of land or labor, but it also may have important implications for nutrition. For example, formative research in Rwanda made clear that target households often didn't have a pen or barn in which to keep livestock. So if given livestock by the project, they would likely pen the animal in the home, which, due to exposure to animal feces, is a major risk factor for child diarrhea and malnutrition. So in addition to providing livestock, the project also provided support to build a barn. Also, in labor-constrained households, increasing women's workload burden, which may have serious negative consequences on her time and energy for childcare, and thus undermine efforts to improve nutrition. All to say, formative research is crucial to ensuring that you've designed an intervention that works for nutrition in your context. As part of the formative research undertaken, it's also important to understand the programs, projects, and services that are available to poor households. Mapping existing services helps to, 1, better link poor households to those services, and also to link the services to each other, and 2, to identify gaps that need to be filled. This is especially important with regard to community workers expected to deliver the project. For example, in Kyrgyzstan, one of the key challenges was the lack of an existing cadre of community workers on which to build. The potential of having community workers who can deliver services at the household level was one of the key lessons learned in the pilot. So for the purposes of improving coherence for healthy diets, the last 3 bullets here are especially important. We know that nutrition education is critical if we expect to achieve impact on nutrition outcomes. We also know that in order to be effective, women and their families need to hear consistent messages about doable actions often and by people they trust. So I'm going to end with an area of opportunity and growth. If we hope to see impact on diet and nutrition, we as a community need to really focus on delivering nutrition education and delivering nutrition education well. The pilot projects here are trailblazers and actively pursuing coherence for healthy diets. I commend each and every team for the hard work they've done, and I know from doing these interviews that it has been really, really hard work. And we have so much to learn from each and every one of these projects. I thank you for your attention and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Andrea, for this presentation. And I'm sorry that we did not get to also see you present, but I think it really captured a bit of all of these experiences, which is a lot of details and that need to be shown and discussed. I do not see any questions yet. So the way I was thinking we could do to stimulate a little bit the questions was that first, just for me to highlight just a few aspects of the presentation. The first one is this importance of these, and it's sort of reiterative, the policy frameworks and the political will to work together and to create these spaces to bring these different sectors together that supported the implementation of this at the local level. So having these coordination spaces available was something I think that is highlighted, that is needed and appreciated to be able to work together. And that's on one level. The other level, which I think is very important to keep in mind, is this idea of how can we, of really understanding the context, no? The understanding what are the needs of these households, specifically these households, understanding the differences between them and the constraints that they face, and how are these decisions being made within the household, as well as understanding what services exist. And this is especially important if we want to work on sustainability of these programs, to ensure that we're working on existing services and identifying maybe gaps of where services do not exist. And this leads me to maybe the question to my panelists, which I think they will have a lot to bring to, is first is in terms of what are the challenges that you would like to share with us, the bottlenecks that existed in really implementing this integrated programming at the local level, and see if you, and I'm thinking of a lot of issues that have been raised by Andrea, but each one I think you can bring something together. And then I will go to the next. Maybe I open up for our panelists to answer. So what do you think as the most challenges, especially in implementing these integrated approaches? And if you want to also go into what you think were the factors that also contributed and elaborate, I think that would be great. Sylvia, please go ahead.
Thank you, Jessica, for the opportunity. Okay, thank you, Jessica, for the opportunity. Good morning and good afternoon to everyone that is part of this webinar. Allow me to begin with a note of appreciation to FAO for this opportunity to offer my contribution. And I also want to take this opportunity to appreciate International Labour Organization of the United Nations for the recent course I took that enhanced my thinking around coherence of activities around social protection, agriculture, food security, and nutrition. On this note, I also want to recognize Pamela, my coach. Thank you for being more than a coach. On issues related to challenges limiting coherent integration of programming around food security and nutrition, I have identified 3 broad challenges, including, of course, as Andrea has mentioned, coordination of different stakeholders around social protection or agriculture and nutrition interventions. Another challenge could, of course, be the capacity gaps across the sectors, right from national even up to the implementation level. Then you could also find in several cases, especially in the case of my country, budget gaps. For the interest of time, though, I want to focus my contributions to the coordination of different stakeholders around a social protection intervention that would increase the production of food commodity, both in quality and in quantity. My background, if you have seen, is much embedded with the implementation of social protection programs like school feeding programs. It's well known that school feeding programs are market opportunities for livelihood improvement around their communities. However, due to different limitations, these programs have not yielded impact as expected. They have faced limitations, including highly competitive procurement methods that have limited smallholder farmers organized into cooperatives to participate in that market, the school market. Secondly, this program has been impeded by weak participation of the community and parents of the children at schools. Parents, the community see school feeding as government responsibility. It should be taken up either by the government or any development partner that sees it important. School feeding programs are implemented in schools, some of which are located in very deep remote areas where accessibility for our case is very challenging, especially during rainy seasons. So, making it short, these programs have not yielded results and have not impacted communities as expected. This is a problem of coordination. If all agencies responsible related to school feeding, including education, including finance and procurement, including health and nutrition, including agriculture, would be brought together at the planning stage. This is very critical. Bringing all stakeholders together at the planning stage, or even from policy formulations. Then each sector would work on its thematic areas. Finance and procurement would work on a model of procurement that facilitates smallholder farmers to be active in school food delivery. And this directly impacts the market. It provides a sustainable market to the community. It incentivizes farmers to produce more diverse quality fresh food and benefit on that food for consumption. And finally, tackle the issue of malnutrition. It brings on board different sectors like environment, to work on issues of environment for sustainability. Local administrative entities to mobilize community around school feeding. School feeding, this is feeding their children. So coordination of different stakeholders at inception, at planning stage, would eventually lead to a sustainable market for the community, would incentivize diverse production of nutritious food, would lead to professionalized farmer organizations, creation of more jobs, incomes, which would in the end lead to availability of nutritious food in a more sustainable way and increase the livelihood of the community around schools. Thank you so much. Over to you, Jessica.
Thank you so much, Sylvia, for coming in. And I think it's great that you're pointing out some of these challenges that we have been facing, and that in bringing together these different sectors in terms of the type of coordination that is required for this to be able to come through and actually work. I think that is one point that is very important that you bring up. The second one I think is very interesting, this to really understand what are these constraints and capacity of these smallholders to be able to contribute and to participate in this local procurement. So understanding the context and the constraints and see what is needed in terms of support that needs to come back to them, that I think is a key message that comes out from your intervention, that is exactly this sort of what echoing what Andrea has been talking about. I wanted to just maybe, I see there's a question here from FAO Malawi about how do we actually do it, you know, at the local level and bring these services coming together. And I think it would be very interesting if I can call on Fatou from Senegal to share a little bit, because this is something that was quite interesting in Senegal, where the local services, the way that it has been identify the areas where to intervene and to build on local services and how to bring these services together would be interesting to have also from a point of view. And then we can also go back to maybe Kyrgyzstan and also the bottlenecks when extension services might not be available at the local level. So let me see if Fatou can come in at this point.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thanks, Jessica, for giving me this opportunity to share the experience in Senegal about integrating agriculture intervention and social protection for improving food security and nutrition. I think before giving the concrete example, I just need to bring a little bit of background of FAO support to the government in terms of integrating social protection and productive intervention. We started first to assess policy program which are linking or which are bringing social protection in Senegal, and to see where are the gaps. This is where FAO started to strengthen capacity and knowledge of different actors, government and non-government actors, to strengthen the coherence between social protection, agriculture, livestock, and fisheries. This was done at different levels. At national level with different ministries, but also at decentralized level, so that at least we talk about coordination in terms of policy at national level, but to operationalize also this coherency at local level. This is how we come in to support FAO, the government program, the national cash transfer. And then after this session of capacity building, also FAO supported the government to evaluate, to assess the national cash program. One of the main recommendations was how to define convergence or synergy between the cash transfer program and other supportive programs like agriculture, fisheries, and livestock. And this is where we have the request from government to develop or to try to implement this pilot with the international, the interregional TCP. And how do we get to have this coordination at local and level to implement the project? Was that we started the planning, and I will build where, from what Sylvia just said. The planning stage was very important. So we launched the project, and at the inception meeting, we brought all stakeholders together under the supervision of the governor of the region, because we are implementing the TCP in one region called Diourbel, and under the supervision of the governor of the region, all stakeholders participated in the planning session when we the selection of the commune where we intervene, even the selection of the beneficiaries criteria was defined in a participatory way. And the governor, after the inception or launching of the project, create by a decree what we call the regional working group, which bring together FAO, of course, has the coordinator who is coordinating the global the project, but mainly government, the Social Protection Agency, the Ministry of Agriculture, mainly the Extension Services Agency, the Rural Development Service, Livestock, and the Nutrition Agency, and other relevant stakeholders under what we call the Regional Working Group. And the Regional Working Group plan, coordinate, and exchange on how do we implement the project. And even the scoping, mission, and packages were defined within this regional working group, which come together every 3 months to discuss about the project implementation, how did we go, what are the challenges, and how do we respond to these challenges. This is how it was built in Senegal, and I think it was at the beginning gathering many cross-sectoral services together was maybe a challenge to move fast, but when they understand that we have the same objective and we were complementing, because what is important also to have the regional working group was we did not duplicate what exists. We build on what exists to complement with activities that was needed to given to beneficiary of the national cash transfer. I think I will stop here and give the floor back to Jessica. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fatou. Thank you very much for giving us a bit more details. And I think it's interesting, the last points that you raised. The first one is the fact that coordination does require time, and it takes more time than working alone. So this is something that needs to be built. It's not something that happens automatically and needs discussion and participation. And the more participation, the more there is this likelihood to be working together. The second point that I think was very interesting that you brought up is the duplication. No? It would be such a pity to duplicate what exists. So this mapping of this, what exists, and knowing what services are available and understanding where the gaps are is something strategic in trying to bring these sectors together and coming together in a strategic way. So I think these are two items that I think are very interesting, especially at the end of your whole speech. I wanted to bring in Laxan because we have the question from FAO Malawi that is also directed to Lesotho to share a little bit on his view of the experience in Lesotho. Please go ahead, Laxan.
Okay, thank you very much, and hello to everyone. It's my pleasure meeting you all virtually. Just to add on to the discussions, especially on challenges in terms of coordination. Apart in this, again, we'll link up with the question that came from my colleague from Luis from Malawi. Actually, what we also noted within Lesotho, we had another project which was similar to the one that has been highlighted here. In fact, it came out as a result of the project that has been highlighted. And in that project, which is the Sustainable Poverty Reduction through Incomes, Nutrition, and Access to Government Services, the whole concept actually is still the same: provide additional support to beneficiaries of the Child Grants Program, which is a cash transfer program. And looking at that in terms of coordination, what we noted is that actually the coordination is much greater at the local level. Within the communities and district level, there was actually much greater coordination amongst the stakeholders than it is at national level. And in that regard, we actually found out that the agriculture extension officers supporting the Ministry of Social Development within the communities, and also the involvement of other non-state actors was actually great in terms of mobilizing the communities to come together, which made it much easier for the extension workers to provide the training to those communities. And in any case, at national level, some of the major challenges that are coming out arise out of the lack of coherence in terms of policies. So there is need for that greater integration of the different policies that are available. The National Food Security Policy, for example, should be able to highlight the synergies with the social protection policy, and that could help bring together and create greater coordination mechanisms at national level. But by and large, what we noted through the research that we are doing is that at community level, there's actually much greater coordination. The various stakeholders, the Ministries of Social Development, Ministry of Agriculture, are actually working in a much better coherent manner and coordinated manner than it is at national level. So we need, I think, dialogue that could help bring those major stakeholders at national level and advance the dialogue or discussions on bringing together agriculture and social protection. Thank you very much. I thought I would just add that to the discussions.
Thank you very much, Laxon. I think it's very useful and interesting how in different contexts, different things worked, no? That it was easier at the community level to get this coordination working. So really needing to understand the institutional frameworks and organization to be able to put this in place, no? I also thought it was very interesting, the needs for these national policies, food security and nutrition and other policies to highlight the synergies that can come through, which also is a factor that can support these moving in a more coherent and integrated way. I will now pass it on to our Kyrgyzstan colleagues, Marlene, maybe, and just maybe talking about this idea that, you know, how these policies and the frameworks can support, but also how do the Cash Plus pilots can feed back into the national dialogue and frameworks? And maybe I can call on Marlene and then Azel if you can complement. Thank you.
Hello, good morning or afternoon. My name is Marlene. I'm from Kyrgyzstan. And thank you very much for inviting me and Asel to participate in this amazing webinar on linkages between social protection and other sectoral areas, food security, agriculture, and some other dimensions. In Kyrgyzstan, we had a very successful case on Cash Plus pilot, which was implemented and generated meaningful results. And as a result, it helped many low-income rural families to improve their livelihood. For example, I want to go very quickly on some results which generated from the assessments of the pilot, and we can see that more than 74% of households who participated in the pilot were able to improve their agricultural productivity and also could generate additional income. A part of it, 70% of households have improved their food security, while more than 90% of the pilot beneficiaries reported that they could improve their dietary diversity and nutrition of the children. So taking into consideration its efficient approach the Cash Plus pilot contributed to a few policy documents and strategies, including National Food Security and Nutrition Program for the period of 2019 and 23. So within this Food Security and Nutrition Program, there are activities that focused on learning best practices and pilots that could help to stimulate low-income families with self-employment, generating income, and improving nutrition based on the products which they can produce on their own themselves. So Cash Plus, along with other pilots, were considered as one of the successful approaches that could really help people in the field to improve their livelihood. In according to the needs of the program, Cash Plus pilot further was analyzed deeper, and all evidence-based findings, key results were collected from the rapid assessment, situation analysis, and other process evaluation reports, and further presented to the government, which some of them are being considered in other policy responses and strategies. One of them, it is social protection development strategy until 2023, and also social contract concept. So currently it is still in the process, and we hope government will be further consider inputs from the Cash Plus pilot in integration into these policy documents. In addition to that, you know, the crisis in relation to COVID, it's also caused some issues in the country. So Cash Plus approaches also considered as a model to reduce economic consequences, especially in the rural areas. I want to also mention that all of this support was provided within the regional FAO project on developing capacity for food security and nutrition that was financed by the Russian Federation. As for the challenges for programming food security and nutrition across concerning sectors, I would like to just mention that food security in general, it's more like a broader concept, and it is an essential part for sustainable development, which strongly linked with other sectoral areas like agriculture, social protection, and health. Today in Kyrgyzstan, food security and nutrition are considered to be high on the agenda of the government, especially in times of crisis to the COVID-19. And in Kyrgyzstan, food security and nutrition, actually it's a new concept, and the first program was implemented in 2015. This is the first experience, and implemented was for 2 years. And out of this implementation, we were able to observe and provide some recommendations. So one of the key observation was that we noticed that food security nutrition program wasn't involved too much representative of the private sector and also civil society, which are the key and core partners. Not only they should be considered in the development process, but also in implementation and monitoring and evaluation. In this case, we can ensure that the program will be more transparent and efficient in implementation. A part of it, I just want to also mention that issues in relation to raising awareness around of food loss, waste, food safety, health and nutrition remain still low in the region, which is an integral part of strengthening in general food security and nutrition among the population. Therefore, first of all, last but not least, it is very important to focus on building capacity, not only for targeted population, but for also those for policy decision makers who participate in the process of making decision, so they can better coordinate and the management and implementation will be more efficient. As at the country level, at the universities, there is no comprehensive training program on food security. Actually, this is like very comprehensive, and that's why it would be more logical to seek on methodological and training materials then which can be reintegrated into the university programs and will be open to everyone, including public servants, civil society servants, public officers who are involved in the process of coordination of this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Marlene. I'm conscious of time, so I might just, I will go to Susanna just to hear a little bit from our Armenian experience, and then I will definitely come back to Azel to complement. And just maybe, I think as we have a question here on how can we ensure that social protection packages are well used for vulnerable communities to be better off, I think maybe Susanna, you can explain a little bit on how it was implemented and how how the selection of participants was done, and a little bit on what were the differences between the different households and how and all of the visits that have been made to the households. So maybe I will just pass on to Susanna and to highlight some of these challenges and opportunities from this Cash Plus, and then I will come back to Azel. Susanna, off to you. Sorry, Susanna, you're still on mute. If you can unmute your...
Oh, okay. Sorry, dears.
Perfect.
Hi, everyone. I just will share the point of view of everyone that coordination and well cooperation is really matters in implementing integrated social protection, and particularly Cash Plus type interventions. But okay, let me just focus on what type of challenges we did have at the ground, as I can say so. The most challenging issue, as I can say, was the targeting of beneficiaries. Who do we choose to participate in the pilot? What are the criteria that we employ to choose those beneficiaries? Of course, we worked on it. With all stakeholders, we defined pretty transparent, simple, and very understandable criteria to choose our beneficiaries. But there is one thing I want to focus on, that when we already were in a process of implementation, we understood that we do have two types of beneficiaries. Beneficiaries who are pretty much skilled. They have certain level of capacity, but for some reason, they lack the opportunity to become more economically active in agriculture. And when they are given this opportunity, they succeeded really very well. And we do have beneficiaries that besides the opportunity, they really lack the skills and capacity. And working with this, the trainings, the coaching, delivering a mechanism of knowledge, delivering mechanism, they should be pretty much different for this second group of beneficiaries to assure their, how to say, to assure the outcome that we're expecting. In other words, see, like, even though given the opportunity to conduct the agricultural, to become more active in agricultural production, this type of households that lack the capacity and skills, they were not succeeded in Armenia. Unfortunately, this is something that I have to point out. So, really coaching matters. And if I asked for the future, what should be like changed, I would more focus on coaching on this element and on the format of delivering the information, the trainings, the knowledge. So this is very important because, see, like, at least in Armenia, in implementing the Cash Plus, we didn't have any issue on coordinating or cooperating with at all in all levels, starting with the ministry level and on the grounds with the local authorities. The extension services, more or less, they were available to these regions where we implemented the pilot. So the issue was the affordability of these services. The issue is the affordability of healthy food, if I can say so. If we could register some improvement in assuring some improvement in dietary like outcomes, but increasing the income to be able to create by their own the capacity to access the extension services, to access the markets. Here we do have a lot of challenges, if I'm clear. My point is, the final point is that when we're how do we target our beneficiaries is really matters. And again, the final objective, what is the final objective? We want to assure, of course, when we implemented the Cash Plus, we wanted to create positive evidence, and we succeeded in that. And I would say that the government of Armenia took into consideration and adopted a decree which means that the government will further in implementing Cash Plus type interventions. But on the other hand, what do we want really? I mean, we want income diversification, we want increase of income, we want these people to be able to operate, to become more active, proactive. I mean, and create their own way of coming out of poverty, as I can say so. Because once sustainability, how we can make sure that these people, after we stop supporting them, after the program is implemented and ended, how we can be sure that these outcomes are sustainable in the future. So if I'm clear, so this is the main concern from my perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Susanna, so much. I think a lot of points that you've raised, and I think a lot of them that are very interesting. I will pick on some that maybe that have not been raised, in the sense that the coaching, I think, is something that we know that it's something that we from the literature, we see that there is an importance in supporting these more vulnerable populations, in supporting them all along the way to ensure that we reach the outcomes that we want. And it's something that needs to be there. I know that in Kyrgyzstan, we even developed a manual, but we never got to the point. And it really requires, I think it's a point that needs to be thought of in the future and in the future programming. This accessing of services, I think, is a very interesting point of how do we ensure this, that everybody can access these services, because with the project we were supporting, but how do you ensure that even the more vulnerable are accessing these services? And then, yeah, I will maybe stop at that because we have very few more minutes, and I want to just pass the microphone to Azel for her contribution, and then I will wrap it up. Go ahead, Azel.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, colleagues. So I will try to capture it in a nutshell. So in Kyrgyzstan, we have three main components: small farming with the extension services and seeds provided, nutritional, educational trainings, and also social support trainings. And we saw that there were synergies and coherence between the first two components. But we actually, even though we developed the manual, the methodology on how to conduct this coaching and follow-up visits, and we work with the key people in the ground, so the social workers and the local self-government representatives. But still, we can see that it's also structural thing, and we have challenges because this is quite complicated components and structures, right? So what we can actually make an emphasis that it's not enough just to develop this methodologies and train the right people to make this home visit and case management, using this case management. It's very difficult and comprehensive work. It requires a full-time job position with the adequate specialized training and personnel. And I do agree with the comment of my colleague Marlene that we need to work more with the universities where they would be preparing the social workers to use this case management methodologies and have this educational background. But I would also make an emphasis that this is also something which, as you know, Kyrgyzstan is financially not sustainable because we lack government support in introducing this spectrum of support, right? Because we have to also manage this psychosocial aspects or other obstacles which families are facing being in a difficult life situation. So this is more comprehensive and more structural changes which are required on different layers. And this would be maybe my final point of what we learned from our experience working with this community. Thank you. Back to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Azel. I think, yes, I completely agree that there are some structural issues and the way that it is organized and the need for this capacity development that goes beyond a few trainings, but really trying to ensure that there is within the system so that when these social workers come out, they have this ability to do this casework or to this linking this and psychosocial support that is needed. So definitely, I think it is coming out also from the work. So I think we have just a few minutes to wrap up. So I wanted to first thank all of our participants, our panelists, for taking the time to not only to implement these different programs, but also to come here and to share all of these experiences. And I know that this could go on for another few hours, because I think all of you have so much more to offer and to share, and yes, and so I'm very grateful for your participation. I also thank all the people that have joined us today, and I hope that some of these information that we have been sharing is useful for you, and that you find it useful in your way of programming. I wanted to just finalize with some of the key points that we have raised before leaving you and saying goodbye. And I think one is this need for the frameworks and social protection. And I think it's interesting with Senegal and Rwanda, with all of the work that was built prior to even getting to the social protection, the Cash Plus programs, that on coherence and bringing these different sectors and common understanding, which is one thing. The second thing is that, and I think between Andrea and the different panelists, the importance of these different understanding who are we helping, who are we supporting for them to be able to improve their capacity and improve their diets, and what are the constraints that they face, and what is and specifically when we're talking with the extreme poor, who are these, and what are those bottlenecks that they have to be able to increase their capacity, whether it is accessing these services because they're just too expensive to get it, whether they need psychosocial support to support them to get through all of this, or what are these services that, and what are the different population differences between them, and having slightly this flexibility to be able to adjust in that, understanding also what are the services available and filling these gaps, and I think this is highlighted with the lack of sometimes services existent at the local level, and I think this is going to come out in the compendium. And if there is not those services, who comes in to fill that gap, and how do we support the national institutional structures that will support these gaps? It has not been raised, but I think it's such an important point, is on gender, and it has come out from the initial findings of some of the assessments, and I wanted to raise it here just because it's so important. This idea of intra-household dynamics and traditional roles, and especially in terms of diets. And Andrea pointed it out in her presentation, but I know that in the different countries we have seen that traditional rules limit the healthy diets that especially women are consuming. And this is something that we need to take into account, and also on what burden, extra burden that we give when we are providing these types of productive capacity. Who is taking on this? What type of agricultural crops are more likely to be taken on by women and what by men? And how does this affect the whole intra-household dynamic? So I think this is something I just wanted to raise because I really do think it's important. The last one, because I know that Andrea would love me to emphasize, which I completely agree, is this transforming increased production to increased diversified production and better diets requires nutrition sensitive approaches, requires nutrition education and awareness, and this does not come in one go, and will need something of a more long-term approach. And so I will stop here, and I will just thank everybody for being here, and hope that you, just to let you know that all of this information and PowerPoint presentations will be available on the socialprotection.org site, and we will make sure to try to answer any of the questions that we unfortunately hadn't had time to address. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Everyone.
Thank you so much. Bye.